Like with many things in life, I was very late to the game, but I have finally gotten around to watching Midnight Mass, a limited series on Netflix created by Mike Flanagan, who happens to be one of the best guys in the game of horror right now. And this is a show that's been recommended to me probably ever since it originally came out in 2021. I just have never gotten around to actually watching it, but I have finished the series. And yes, it is definitely one to talk about. But the thing about this kind of a series is that in order to really talk about it, you have to talk about spoilers. And I feel like that's okay for this video, just given the fact that the show came out over 3 years ago now. So I think it's okay to just dive into spoilers. But if for some reason you haven't seen it and you don't want spoilers, essentially the best summary I could give you is that it has a lot of similarity to a lot of early Stephen King stories like Salem's Lot, where you're dealing with a community of people and something strange is slowly making an emergence. But in this particular case, our group of people, our town, is isolated on an island. It's a fisherman's town, and most of the people here on this island are deeply religious. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be a problem, but when this supernatural element starts to draw itself to the town, it is showcased in a way where people are very misguided and misled, thinking that this is some kind of miracle or some kind of gift from God, as things start getting darker and stranger and more intense as time goes on. It's also a series that I feel is deeply about understanding one another, as strange as that may be, as well as accepting horrible things that have happened in our past and hopefully gaining some kind of forgiveness, or maybe the importance of forgiveness. But in the midst of that, there is this dynamic horror element that is slowly unraveled throughout the course of the 7 episodes, to the point where in episode 1, you only get the smallest of teases about the supernatural element that's at play, and it's slowly incorporated throughout the series, very similarly to how the characters are experiencing what's happening, just this long, drawn-out process until it ultimately culminates into a midnight mass. And by the final episode, things have shifted 180, where things are now most heavily featured with the supernatural element, with very little normalcy happening anymore. But it is the process of figuring this out. It is becoming accustomed to the multiple different characters that we have going on in the series. There's multiple main characters. A lot of people are important, and it gives you time to really get to know them and understand them, which is the best thing that you could do for storytelling, so that when the shit hits the fan, you actually care, or at least you understand where everybody is coming from in this little town. It also has a lot of themes, how darkness can spread through religion under the guise of doing good, or perhaps the fear of disobeying, wanting to be a good person and wanting to do the right thing that God commands you, to the point where you sort of forget your own critical thinking, your critical analysis of what's actually happening here, to understand that you're actually doing horrible things, but in the name of good, and how it can constantly be justified in that. Or that there's things in this world that are beyond our understanding, and some people can only filter that through the lens of what they believe in, whether or not it's true or not, that the thing that they're experiencing has anything at all to do with their religion. They're going to filter it in a way that they believe that it actually is incorporated with what God wants and what's written in the scriptures. And it's interesting to see how many people continuously go along with something that is getting darker and darker and darker before anybody rises up to question it. Now, at the same time, I don't believe that this series is anti-religion. I actually think this series is about communication in a big way, which I thought was one of the more fascinating elements of it, because you have the majority of people that are on this island that are Christian, but you also have a few atheists, and you also have a Muslim father trying to raise his child, kind of feeling ostracized and kind of feeling like he's the one person that everyone's staring at all the time, because everybody else is so deeply invested with the Christian church of the community. So it kind of showcases how people feel like they're viewed through other lenses. And I think it shows a lot of the similarities, but also the differences that keep us from wanting to understand one another. Even though we may believe very, very similar things and have different language to express this, there's those specific barriers of, I have to think this way, that just doesn't allow you to see someone else's perspective. And I think by the end of the series, before I go into spoilers, I think the ending really shows how different people that believe different things all experience a similar event and have a similar experience where they're all feeling the same feeling, but they just have different ways to express that feeling, which I thought was a shockingly beautiful ending to a series like this that has such incredible amounts of horror elements incorporated in it that I don't want to go into before going into spoilers. So yeah, I'm going to get into the series and just kind of talk about how I felt about it. If you haven't seen it before, I highly recommend it. I don't know if this is going to, be some type of way if you have very, very heavy religious views. Like I said, I don't think it's criticizing the faith itself. I think it's criticizing the way people manipulate and utilize that in order to control or perhaps do darker things with the justification that they're doing good. It's more about how humans respond to things than it is actual like religious texts and that kind of stuff. It doesn't go into like, specifics of religion in itself. It's more about how people utilize it or how people respond to it or how people are in fear of particular things. So it deals more with themes of humanity, you know what I mean? But it's using religion as kind of its basis to showcase this. This is definitely one of those series that, although a lot of the atmosphere is dark and dreary, it's always raining on this island, and we see a lot of scenes happening at nighttime for particular reasons, but every shot looks so beautiful. And when the horrific stuff does happen, you feel it. It feels powerful because, like I said, there's this slow lead into it. Episode 1, episode 2, you don't really get a whole lot of it. You're more so just learning about the characters and learning about the town. And then by the end of episode 3, we are showed without a question of a doubt that there's supernatural elements happening here. And then it kind of slowly unravels and gets stronger and stronger and stronger as it goes on. So yeah, I highly recommend it. But I'm going to get into spoilers because it's the only way to really talk about this show. Now, there's a couple of main characters to point out, but my favorite character of the series and the one that I want to talk about the most is the priest, the main priest character. Because you completely understand his point of view and his perspective, or at least I did while watching it. Even though I can admit objectively the things he is doing are evil, I can see how he views it as a gift from God and how he views it as if he's doing God's will. Because essentially what happens is he was an older man, like a man that was getting so old to the point where he was becoming a little bit senile. He might have had the early stages of dementia. They talk about how he would walk around and kind of not know where he was going half the time, but he was kind of like the most famous person on this island because he was the head priest of their church. And, like 95% of the people on this island go to church. And, they've seen him for years and years and, decades. And so they grew up with him, basically. So he's a very important guy. And he goes on this journey, to I like the Holy Lands, or something like that. And he ends up falling in this cavern where he sees a creature that he believes, and this even makes more sense in his more like, mentally deteriorated state, that he believes is an angel. Like, without a question, without a shadow of a doubt, this man believes that this is an angel. And I love the first reveal of it because we see this creature in the darkness and we see its glowing eyes, very reminiscent of Salem's Lot. And we see that it has wings. And you're just like, and this doesn't happen until episode 3 that we see this flashback. And we're like, what the hell? And this creature jumps on the priest, feeds on him like a vampire. It's definitely a vampire. Even though they never use the word vampire, it's definitely a vampire. But in doing so, in the blood swapping, he, infects the priest with this vampirism and essentially de-aging him, healing him. So the vampirism in this series does more than just turn you into a vampire. It's kind of a slow process where it begins to sort of draw you back to your most... I don't know if I want to say most powerful state, but like your younger, a youthful, stronger version of yourself. in which he does. So when he comes back to the town as a younger man, nobody recognizes him, and he pretends to be somebody different. He pretends to be a new priest. But with him, he's bringing this advent of the fact that he saw this angel and that he wants to share this gift with the people of the town. And these miracles start happening in the form of him slowly distributing this vampire blood, in like the communion where you would, drink the blood of Christ and all that. It's literally blood. And, strange things start happening, like the girl in the wheelchair starts to be healed and be able to walk. There's an old woman that's progressively becoming younger. Just slowly, these things are happening. But then it also does horrendous things, like a woman that's pregnant. It's actually kind of healing her, treating the pregnancy like an infection, and makes her have a miscarriage. So as these characters are slowly being fed this blood that's changing them biologically, they start to believe that this is all in the guise of, a calling from God, essentially, that this is going to be this next stage, this sort of rebirth, resurrection. The series takes place around Easter, where it's very much about like the resurrection of Christ and everything. And so there's this sort of, this massive misunderstanding that this priest believes that a vampire is an angel. Oh, and I also want to say I really appreciate the casting of this series. And I don't mean this as a backhanded compliment. I mean this as a legitimate compliment. But every actor in the show feels like they look like somebody that would actually be living in a small town. There's no like Hollywood attractive people in this series. Again, it's not like a backwards compliment. It's actually something I noticed that I appreciated about this, that we weren't having like supermodels as the main stars. Like everybody looked like a normal working person. And I really appreciated that about this. But anyways, another one of the most darker characters is a character named Bev Keane. She is a woman that I think if you have ever lived in a very heavily religious town or maybe been part of religious groups, you've known somebody like this. Somebody that everything they say is actually a backhanded compliment. Somebody that believes themselves to be superior over everybody else because they follow the Bible and they go to church every Sunday, right? Somebody that is this heavily judgmental person that, works in no ways to find forgiveness in other people, even though that's what they spout and that's what they talk about. She does not. She goes behind people's backs and poisons somebody's dog. She also, believes in what the priest says and like is excited about this advent of this angel and everything. But the way that the show depicts her, even before the supernatural stuff is showcased, I think that it's something that a lot of people probably have experienced somebody like this that uses that guise of I'm a good person because I am a Christian, when really behind the scenes they're, more horrible and more judgmental than anybody else you've ever met. And they use that sort of mask of I'm a good person in order to do all of these horrible things, and also never show, the actual love and compassion and admiration that is actually talked about. The things that they proclaim that they follow, they actually really don't. But the thing about it is that they're so naive and they're so bought into their own bullshit that they don't even realize that they're not really following it. You know what I mean? So I think we've all experienced somebody like that before, for sure. And I thought she was one of the best characters in the show for that reason. She was like a female version of Malzgis from Berserk, if you guys know that series, or she would have been, she basically was, like, when she, became like a vampire at the end, like, she basically is Malzgis, if anybody knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, so she reminded me very much of that. Now, there is a main character named Riley, because his name was Riley Flynn, and I was like, isn't that the name of one of the characters from Buffy the Vampire Slayer? But I think that's Riley Finn. So very close. Anyways, Riley is a very compelling character, and he's presented as the main character, and for most of the series he is. It was extremely shocking when what happens to him. But for the majority of the series, he's dealing with this survivor's guilt, where he, because of his drinking, was in an accident and ended up killing another person. And so, there's this sense of needing to find forgiveness within yourself, and the guilt that he feels that there's even jealousy when, he's speaking with the priest, and the priest is now capable of killing without feeling guilt because of the vampirism. And it's something that, he's not capable of experiencing, and nor should he. You know what I mean? Like, he should feel guilt, but at the same time, there is always possibility for forgiveness and redemption. And what I found very interesting about the show is that, this was a heavy theme that carried out through so much of this series. There was a character that was, responsible for harming the girl that couldn't walk. And, he became this recluse, he became this drunk, and everyone in the town looked at him in a particular way. And once he started to really give up the drinking, and when she found forgiveness in him, he was able to start doing better as a person. Which was cut short, obviously, when he was ripped apart. But until then, it shows that there is really hope out there. And it wasn't particularly religion or not religion. It was simply just the act of forgiveness, which I think is a powerful thing, and not something that you need to be religious or anti-religious to understand and experience. I think if people seek it, I think most people, if they put in the work, do deserve forgiveness. I'm not of the mindset that somebody does something wrong, for the rest of their life, they have to be, treated as less than dirt if they're showing you that they are working towards redemption. I'm wearing a Vinland Saga shirt that my boy Harrison made me, and that whole series is about redemption, well, I mean, partially, but, it's about a character that really, really does everything he can to try to do things better. And, Riley is dealing with this, and I thought they did a great job making you understand why he didn't fall back into religion, where he just, he couldn't feel it, he couldn't experience it, but at the same time, he was no more or less valid than any other character. There's a great scene where he's talking with the girl that had lost her, had lost her baby, unknowingly, after, drinking all this vampire blood. And they're having a conversation about what they think happens when they die. And what I really loved about this moment too is because at this point in time, I would say that character, the girl, I forget the character's name, but she was still religious, and Riley was certainly atheist. But they were able to have this conversation about what they think happens when you die without any kind of judgment or any kind of need to correct the other person, any kind of need to say, no, you're wrong, this is it, or no, that's it. And I really, really loved that moment between those two characters, because they were able to fully understand and accept each other, and both of them had been going through it like crazy. And what does it matter what somebody's belief is when you're in a time where you need comfort and when you need understanding? At least I don't think so. Like, I'm not a religious person myself, so I look at a lot of these things kind of objectively. Like, I try to understand the headspace of every, character or every person that would be believing in this or that. But at the end of the day, I kind of just look at it as, character, like a character by character basis. And I don't put my own, thoughts or beliefs into it. I just kind of see what they're saying. And the fact that they were able to speak that way back and forth to one another, I thought was a really, really great moment for the show and for both characters. But I also thought the show dealt with these themes of kind of fear of stepping out of line, when you're so heavily indoctrinated within these, within the church of, this small town, because it's a very small community and everybody knows each other, and, gossip travels and stuff. And so it's hard to say no, right? It's hard to stand up and do the right thing when everyone around you is pushing you to do something else. And especially when they're pushing you to do something else with the banner of the church. And it's like, well, I don't want to be a bad person, and you feel that guilt. And just like a lot of the themes of the show are about guilt. But they express it in a number of really creative ways. I think one way is with the sheriff character, who is the only Muslim on the island, and he believes things in a different way. And they are, sharing Bibles at school to his son, and he doesn't want his son to join, although he's trying to be as understanding, as accepting as he can. And he knows that because he's the only Muslim on the island, that every time he speaks up, he gets that side eye, everyone stares at him, and everyone, it's just like, he's the different one. And it's like, that's got to be like a really scary, stressful thing. And especially he has this authority in the town too. So that makes people look at him even, in an even darker way, because it's like, oh, the different guy is the guy with the authority. And so he tries not to push any buttons, but at the same time, he's a good dude. He's a good cop. He's got to do what he has to do. And so I like that sort of, questioning that he has. Like, do I act? Do I not act? What do I do in this situation? And then you have characters like Bev that are constantly, throwing these snide remarks at him time and time again. And it's just, I don't know. There's just something very realistic about all that. But at the same time, you have this massive horror element. So yeah, let's talk about the actual vampire or the angel. Who knows what it actually was? You know what I mean? So this isn't really a character. It's more of like a force of nature. It never really speaks. You do see it kind of dressed in human clothing to blend in a little bit, although it only shows up at particular times. It can fly, obviously. And it seems to be, okay spreading its kind of plague, its vampirism across this entire island, while just periodically using people to feed on. I could tell in some scenes they were doing a lot of practical effects with it, but in other scenes it was CGI, which I felt like, there's not really much you can do with that if you want to have him flying around and grabbing people and stuff. It's got to be CGI. But it looks very much, like a Nosferatu, typical, Salem's Lot kind of vampire character. But it's not really a character, like I said. It's more of just like this force of nature, this entity that shows up, does its thing, and pieces out, and then periodically just feeds on people while watching the people destroy themselves in the process. And as the people are becoming, I guess, more of a vampire, they're not to the extent of the main vampire character. It's a little bit more like... I don't know how to describe it, but I guess it's like maybe it's just because they're not pure vampires. Maybe this isn't even a vampire. Maybe this is actually like a demon, like an actual demon, and the people are just getting infected and they're getting enhanced. You know what I mean? Like I said, they're healing, they're becoming younger, and they get to a point where they can't be killed other than by the daylight. So I thought, that was interesting to see how different this creature still was. It was almost as if it was, like a biblical like character, whether an angel or a demon or whatever it was. I call it a vampire because, it sucks blood, it dies in the sunlight, typical vampire stuff, but it's never specifically called a vampire in the series, so it really still could be anything. But yes, I thought the way that it approached the subject matter was incredibly well done. And, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that Mike Flanagan really did a great job, not specifically pointing the finger at any particular religion or lack thereof, but pointing the finger at humanity in the sense of how we can take something that is supposed to be there to help and comfort people, and without anybody speaking up when it starts doing darker things, then it becomes a shadow of its former self, right? It becomes something that it's not supposed to be. I think the priest even says at the end, like, I made this about me, and it's supposed to be about God, because he was like, oh, I'm this chosen one, and I'm going to bring this miracle to the town and stuff. And it's like, it's all selfish shit. And that's the same way that the Bev character is. She's completely selfish, but uses the veil of religion to believe that she's a good person. But I think the most terrifying thing about it to me is that they do believe that they are good. Like, it is not an evil person pretending to be good. It is somebody who is completely selfish and full of their own, up their own ass, full of their own personal game, for their personal gain. But they honestly, truly believe that they're doing right. Just like Mosgus from Berserk, and just like these characters here, that's the scary thing, the scary potential of religion, is that you can believe that you're doing good when you're actually doing an incredible amount of harm. And that is by the fault of humanity, So yes, I really, really enjoyed this series. I thought it was great. I'm sorry it took me so long to get to it. I just, Sometimes it does, man. Anyways, if you guys saw Midnight Mass, what do you think about it? If you only watched it when it first came out years ago, well, maybe you want to revisit it now. I don't know. Let me know what you think about it down below. Leave all your thoughts, comments, opinions. Be respectful in the comments. I know whenever you're tackling more touchy subject matter like religion, the comments tend to become a cesspool of arguments and anger, but let's take the ideas of what this show at least gave me, which is this idea of communication and its importance, and that our similarities are more powerful than our differences, and let's be able to have a discussion if we want to about its themes in a respectful way. But other than that, guys, thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. Give this a thumbs up and a comment. I'll talk to you later.